Welcome to this Killik Explains finance video. This week, 5 big decisions for retirement savers. So let's get in there. Number 1, ISAs or pensions. And this is a twofold challenge, if you like. Which is the best one to save through? And then, should I use an ISA first when I reach retirement, or should I be tapping into my pension? How do I make that decision? Now, there's no absolutely right answer, so let's look at some of the criteria. So ISAs on the left. Basically, what's the deal? And I cover this in much more detail in other videos, so a quick summary here. With ISAs, there's no upfront tax relief. You do get tax-free income and growth within the wrapper for up to, in 2017-18, £20,000 per person per year. There's the ability to withdraw 100% of invested funds tax-free at any time, and that's quite important. And watch out, because it does form part of your death estate. So in other words, there are some good breaks in terms of income tax, capital gains tax, but inheritance tax may hit ISAs you leave behind, other than those that are potentially left to a spouse. Now, contrast that with personal pensions. So, this time there's tax relief on contributions. So as you're building your fund, there's the opportunity to add tax relief at your marginal income tax rate, 20%, 40%, whatever it happens to be. So that's good. Within the annual limits, just refers to the fact there are tapering limits that apply to high earners. There's tax-free income and growth in the wrapper, so just like an ISA, once your money's in there, it can then grow income tax and capital gains tax free. Withdrawals, now here's the downside of that tax relief, if you like. Withdrawals are only permitted from the minimum age, currently 55, not at any time on the left, and only the first 25% of the fund is tax-free, whereas everything you take out of an ISA can be done so tax-free at that point. But, and this is something people are increasingly cottoning onto, pensions don't normally form part of a death estate. So you can potentially leave them on to future generations without incurring inheritance tax at 40%. And that is quite a big benefit of pensions and may influence whether you withdraw on pensions rather than ISAs if you're fortunate to have both in retirement. So food for thought. Now, that's not the only big decision. Growth or safety. So a traditional model, if you like, would say, well, under the old pension rules, you had to basically invest 3/4 at least of the money you had into something called an annuity. You had to hand it over to a life assurance company and they'd give you an income stream in return. All right. Now, therefore, pre-retirement, the name of the game, because you wanted the biggest annuity possible, you didn't want to be turning your fund into an annuity just as markets dropped. So the name of the game had to be preservation of capital as you approach retirement. All right, not putting capital at risk. And many schemes did that automatically. In other words, your money will be slowly shuffled as you approach retirement out of, say, equities, across into bonds, cash, and so on. But things have changed. With pension freedom, basically, there's no requirement to buy an annuity. All right? So you can go into drawdown. You can keep funds invested and draw on them. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail in just a moment. And that means your money could stay invested, if you retire at 60, for say 20, 30 years, generating dividend income and so on post-retirement. And therefore, you can decide to some extent how that capital is utilised. Do you have an income focus, a growth focus, or a mixture of the two in the run-up to your retirement date? And increasingly, people are not fully retiring. They're not just hitting a retirement date, handing the money over to a life assurance company, job done. They might be continuing to work, part-time consultancy and so on. So the picture's more blended than it used to be, and pension assets can be inherited, as I mentioned before, and that is starting to influence how potentially people treat their pension assets. So, food for thought there, number 2. Number 3, separate or consolidate. Now, this is the idea that as you're building a retirement fund, you basically may have quite a few of them, because if you change employers regularly, you'll have dribs and drabs of retirement money accumulated over time. So, I'm not saying you should consolidate, but why would you? Well, by consolidating all those bits into one pot, if you like, maybe you can get better performance, a wider access to investments. So if you're getting a self-invested personal pension, for example, maybe you've got more choice than you had with a more conventional style of personal pension. Easier administration, everything in one place, one online statement and summary and so on, and perhaps better buying power when it comes to, say, converting into an annuity or converting part of that fund into an annuity. So lots of reasons why consolidation could make sense. Apart from anything else, it reduces the risk. You simply lose track of all these pension pots, but it's not a one-way street, because you might decide not to do it because of transfer penalties, loss of loyalty bonuses, as previous funds try to sort of lock you in, if you like. There is a bit of hassle, but it's not as bad as it sounds, actually. And ultimately, do you want responsibility? If you're going to, say, open up a SIP on the left here, do you want responsibility for those subsequent investment decisions. All right, so all of that's got to be weighed up. Jam today or jam tomorrow, I've called the next one. Now, this is the idea that you get to retirement. You could pull 25% out of your fund as a tax-free lump sum. All right, and maybe you've got a use for it. Maybe you need to clear debt. Maybe you want to help your children with education. But you don't have to. And this is something people haven't fully cottoned onto necessarily. You don't have to, you could defer it. So the money could stay invested, and then you could pull out your up to 25% of it tax-free in sort of tranches. So you could supplement your retirement income with a nice slice of tax-free income using that lump sum 25%. So another key decision. And finally, annuity or drawdown. Now, as I said, annuities used to be compulsory. The idea you handed money over to a life insurance company, took an income stream, sort of job done. Not much else you could choose to do with your funds. But does that mean that because you've got more freedom now, annuities are dead? No, not necessarily. They do offer a secure income. It's a simple deal, relatively speaking. The investment risk is borne by the provider, which means once your money's been handed over to a life insurance company, if the markets collapse, not your problem. Your income's still guaranteed usually, and they are getting more and more flexible, thank goodness in a way. But annuity rates are pretty poor. The income stream that annuities generate, a lot of people would fancy their chances beating with a drawdown route maybe. Terms can be inflexible. The upside is capped. Once you've handed your money over, that's kind of it, really. And they can be poor value in certain cases, like if you die early. And inheritability can be a bit of a challenge, especially with older policies. Drawdown, therefore, offers a chance to get some flexibility about how and when the money's used. You can do income drawdown, capital drawdown, mixture of the two. An opportunity to generate higher incomes. A lot of people would fancy their chances of beating annuity rates by essentially managing the money themselves, and pension assets, as I say, can be passed on. So, any work you put in can potentially be handed on to future generations. However, the return profile is not as clear-cut. All right, you've got to manage it essentially. Volatility is a problem. All right, you've got to become the kind of person that can live with a degree of short-term volatility and manage that. And the downside risk is theoretically larger should the market take a complete beating. But as I say, there are ways to manage that with the correct investment approach. So there you have it. Big topics covered. If you'd like to know more, editor@killik.com. And to watch some videos on all those topics in a bit more detail, please go to killik.com/learn.